Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Today's daf is daf Nun Ches, and we start from daf Nun Zayin and Beis 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 lines from the bottom. Ahu of that. There was a story, Dava b'Mechuzah, that took place in Mechuzah. Mechuzah was Rava's shtot, that was Rava's city. Also, Israel, a guy came into the shop of a yid, Omer Luhu, and he told the yid there, Isluchu Chamr L'Zavuni, you have wine that you can sell me? Amru Le, they said, Loi, we don't. Have a Yosef Chamra B'Davla. There was a barrel of wine, I guess a jug, that was sitting there on a shelf. Shadu Bey Yedei Shich Bey. So the guy realized that they were lying to him and they didn't want to sell him the wine. So he put his hand into the jug and he was mashachshich. He moved around the wine. Amar Lahu, and he turned to the storekeeper, the owner, the Jew, and he says, Hai lav chamru, this is not wine. Vusados, what is this? This is wine. You have wine. Shakle heich berische and shadya ladana. So the store owner, the Yid, realized what the guy did. So he took the jug and he angrily poured it into the chavias of wine, a whole barrel of wine. Now the shaila becomes, what is the halacha of this yayin? Could be that when the guy put his hand into the jug sitting over there, it could be it was menasach the yayin. He meant to spite the yid and cause him a loss. And now that the yayin nesach is in the chavias, now the whole chavias becomes aser, right? Because aser b'ano, or maybe not. Maybe all he meant to do was just show the yid that he knows that he's got the wine there. So, Vosed the Psak Alocha, Sharye Rava Lazabun Ladikchabim. So, Rava was matir b'hano. He's matir this wine b'hano. He said you could sell it to a guy. Meaning, Rava held that this guy was not manasach the wine. He was just showing that he knows that they have wine and they're refusing to sell it to him. Says the Gemara, if legalei Ravuna bar Chinna, Ravuna breid Rav Nachman. And Ravuna bar Chinna, Ravuna breid Rav Nachman both heard Rav's psak and they asked the wine b'hano. Nafke shepura the Rav v'sharu. So Rav's shofars went out and they declared this heter. They made an announcement in the city that the yayin is mutter. And wherever they lived, Ravuna bar Chinna and Ravuna bar Nachman, they were machriz, they declared, they announced to the entire city that it's aser. Big machloikas over here. Iklar Ravuna bar Nachman l'mechuzah. So Ravuna bar Nachman came to Mechuzah. After a while, I guess he traveled to Mechuzah to Rava. Amr le Rava le Rabbi Yoel Shamoy. So Rava said to Rabbi Yoel, his shamish, Troik Gale. Make sure the doors are locked. Lock them well. I don't want anybody to bother me. Now he meant that he doesn't want Ravuna bar Rav Nachman to come and argue with him with regard to this halacha. He was matir and Ravuna bar Rav Nachman answered. Either way, Allah Gabay, Ravuna bar Rav Nachman actually came. The Shamash probably didn't know that he was trying to prevent Ravuna bar Rav Nachman, who was a gadol. So he allowed him in. And he came in and spoke to Rava. Omer Leis, Ravuna said to Rava, Ki Hagavna, Mai. He repeated the case, and he said, what's the halacha? So Rava said, So Rava immediately changed his mind, and he asked bano. So Rashi says, actually, Rava changed his mind prior to this visit. He had a whole conversation with Abaye. Abaye was mafrech Rava from Shmaitzis and Brises, and Rava changed his mind. So when Ravuna bar Nachman came to visit, Rava had already changed his mind, so he wasn't really lying. Rava said, Asra afilu bano. I asked it bano right now. I'm asking it bano. So he asked him, I heard you paskin otherwise. So Rava said, here Rava didn't admit that he was ever materit. He says, when I said it was mutter, what I meant was means you have to sell it, deduct the value of the wine that was in the jug which the guy touched, the guy moved around, that you're not allowed to have enough from. And demedu chamra mi amri. I'm not being matter that wine that was in the jug. I'm only being matter the rest of the wine. Now Rashi points out the reason why Rava said that Rava was kind of, it's a white lie. And Rashi says, Mishum kisufika amar hachi. Really, ihu kulei shari. At the time, Rava was matter the whole barrel, including the wine that was poured in from the jug, which the guy touched. The guy was moving around. But I guess he was embarrassed, or he was afraid of Rav Huna Berei, the Rav Nachman, so he told over the story differently, which is a very big pliya. Taisvus is very, very bothered that Rava would lie. What's a schlecht? What's wrong if Rava would tell him to isi? Yeah, what's wrong if Rava would tell him to isi? The first wide line, middle wide line in Taisvus, Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph, says, "V'oid miksifalei milsa loimer to isi behedya v'chayzer ani boy." Is it embarrassing to say, right, that I was toya and I had to be chayzer? I think the Gemara in Gittin Mem Gimel or Mem Beis says that ein odem oimer al divrei Torah elam kein nichshel ben tchila. Right? It's not embarrassing to make a mistake. Rava admits. Rava is not embarrassed to admit that he made a mistake. So what's the pshat in this whole story? And Toys has more kashas over here. And at the end, Toys has a whole different story, in a whole different version of the story. Toys says that B'Sfarim Yeshonim, the girsa was different. It was Rav Nachman came to Mechuzah, and Rav Nachman was Rava's Rebbe. And so Rava went to ask Rav Nachman about this shaila, and Rav Nachman said it's osra afilu ba'ano. So Rava asked him, Amar de Omar, that it's mutter. No, so Rav Nachman said, when I said it's mutter, I meant the rest of the barrel, but not the dli, not the wine from the dli that the guy touched. So in other words, it was between Rava and Rav Nachman, and Rava went to Rav Nachman to ask the shaila. Rav Nachman corrected Rava that it's really osra ba'ano, whatever's in the dli, whatever the guy touched, and only the rest of the barrel is mutter. So okay, we have a big shaila what the exact story is, Rashi and Tosfos, and Rashi's version of the story is very difficult to understand. Omar Rava, ki asoy lepompadisa, after nachmeni shmaitza masnisa da aser. So here is where the Gemara recounts how Rava was taka chayzer. Yeah, when he came to Pompadisa, Nachmeni is Abaya. His real name, Machlek is what his real name was. Rashi and the Aruch, I think in Gittin Lamed Gimel or Lamed Beis, it says over there. I think Rashi learns Nachmeni was his real name. Rabba raised him, and Rabba's father was Nachmeni, Rabba bar Nachmeni, so he didn't want to call him Nachmeni after his father's name, so he called him Abaye, which means Avi. So Akfa Nachmeni surrounded me, Shmaitza Masnisa the Aser, he proved to me from Shmaitza and Brises that it's Aser. Shmaitza, where is the Shmaitza that Abaye brought to prove to me that I'm wrong, and that the wine is Aser, the who of the Dav ben Ardah. It's a story in Ardah, okay, keep track, yeah, Mechuzah is Rava, Pompadis over here is where Abaye was, and Ardah is Shmuel. The Aser Shmuel, same story happened in Ardah, and Shmuel Aser the wine, even Bahana. But Tveria, a story happened in Tveria. And I told Abaye that it's not a raya from Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan that they asered. Could be that really it's mutter. The reason why they aser is to Eina b'nei Torah. If he's going to be matir, they're going to come to be mekel in other halachas. But Amalin Abaye said, Tveri Nardo Eina b'nei Torah, the Mechuzah b'nei Torah. What? People of Mechuzah are any better than Tveri and Nardo? They're also not b'nei Torah, so you should have asered Abazai. And then Rava says, he asked me for Masnisa, from a Brisa, the Agardamim Oivet Kechavim. These are the tax people who measure the measurements and store owners in stores to collect taxes. Shekodach b'meinekes. So what do? They bore a hole into one of the barrels of wine, and vehelo, and he took out wine through the meinekes. It's a kana. It's like a straw, a pipe that through it, I guess, you could drink directly from the barrel. Or he put a little bit of wine in the kois. And then whatever was nishar, he poured back into the chavius. So either way, he came in direct contact with some of the wine of the barrel. That was the story of Asru. So asks Abaye to Rava, you see clearly that in such a case it's Osir Bano. The Gemara says, no, Loi B'Shtia. No, Rava said, doesn't say Osir Bano. It says, Zeh Ma'asav Osru. They asked it B'Shtia, not Bano, so I'm not wrong. The Gemara says, Yachi, listen to Seifa. Take a look at the Bryce at the end. Listen to Yemacher, Kediktani Seifa. Should say Yemacher. So this way we'll know it's Mutter Bano, not just Osru Stam. If it's Taka Mutter Bano, say Yemacher, Kediktani Seifa, like it says in the Seifa of that Bryce. It says A guy who is a choram. What's a choram? Choram, Rashi says, a meshugane. Meshuga, ubal merivos. Somebody who doesn't shy away from starting a fight. He does things impulsively. So he thinks it's shemen. So you see a guy who touched wine, so you see that it's mutter bahano, says yimacher. So if it's really mutter bahano, in that case, in the Reisha, it should also say yimacher. If it says vasru stam, means that it's actually aser bahano. Right? So here it's shaloi bekavana, but shaloi bekavana is mutter bahano, bekavana is aser bahano, tiyufta derava, tiyufta, that's why Rava was chayzer. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan ben Adazev, Rabbi Yosef ben Rav Yasvik Shasa Chamra. They were drinking wine. Asahu Gavra. Certain fellow came along. Amrulei. They said to this guy, Toashkinon, pour us a little bit of wine. I guess he was like a waiter. Okay. After he poured the wine, they realized this guy was a guy. So there was like an extreme opposite machlokas. One of the Chachamim said it's aser legamri even ba'ano, and one of the Chachamim said it's mutter afilu b'shtia. Omer Rabbi Shmuel Levi, man da aser shaper aser, man da shari shaper shari. I can hear both svaras. Man da aser, the one who aser this case, Meimer Omar, he said to himself, Sal kadait Rabban Kahana shichri kashasu. You think that these Chachamim are drinking beer? Elavadai chamruhu. Avada, it's wine. In other words, when the guy poured the wine, when this guy poured the wine, he was for sure, he was certain that this is wine. V'nasche. And because he knew right away that they're drinking wine, so now we have to be suspicious that when he poured, he probably was manasich with intention to serve as Avodah Zarah. Man de shari shaper shari, and the one who's matter also has a good svar to be matter. Why? Because Meimer Sal kadai Rabban Kahani Chamer Kashasi v'Amr Lididi Toshkinon. Yeah? The Havamin of the Rabbanon, you think the Chachamim would tell me to pour them wine? If it's really wine, why would they tell me to pour wine? Avada, they're not going to tell me to pour wine. Elavada shichru kushasu, must be they're drinking beer, but loy nasche. He didn't realize it was wine b'chalal because he was certain that they're not going to, they would never tell him to pour wine for them. Gemara asks, what do you mean? This whole shaila revolves around what his assumption was. He sees it's wine. Gemara says belelia, no, it was at night. But kamoirichle, he smells that it's wine. Gemara says becharata, it's new wine, doesn't have that smell. But kanoga bebenatla, what do you mean? Anyways, either way, he's touching the keli. Yeah. Right? If he's collecting the wine into the keli from the barrel, avadi is touching the wine. It's magov tchomish lekavana v'aser. It's definitely aser b'shtia. How could anybody say it's mutter b'shtia? Letzricha the kamoirik ayruke. V'avel lekoichoy sheloi b'kavana. In other words, he never stuck the keli into the barrel to take out wine from there, so he never touched the wine itself. It's a case of the kamoirik ayruke directly from the jug. V'havale koicha shloi bekavana, v'chol koicha shloi bekavana legazru beirabanan. Any koicha shloi bekavana is there's no gzeira derabanan, even with regard to shtia. Okay. Boimenei Reb Asim Reb Yochanan. So I guess this is the machlokas here. Koichoi sheloi bekavana. He poured it directly from the chavius into their kois. He never used a pitcher. So if he didn't know it was wine, so I guess that's shaloi bekavana. It's koichoi shaloi bekavana. Okay, wine that was diluted by a guy. The olden days, right, the wine was so strong you had to dilute it, to pour water in there. So here, the guy didn't even touch the wine itself. Yeah, he just poured water into the kais. So what's the halacha mahu? Why did you use the word mezagoi? Side conversation. I use the lashon pasuk where the pasuk refers to meziga as mesicha. Rabbi Yochanan said, don't use lashon Torah. That's a separate lashon. Lashon chachamim la'atzma. You should use lashon chachamim. Rabbi Yochanan answered the question aser. You should know it's aser, even though he didn't touch the wine. He just poured water into it. Because it's archaka, just like we tell a nazir who's not allowed to eat grapes or drink wine, stay away from the kerem. So too, you should stay away from whatever could bring to yain nesach. He saw people were drinking wine that goyim diluted. He also was answered them from this memra. Okay, so that's another brisa that says like Rabbi Yochanan. Shlakish came to a town called Batzra. He saw Yidden eating peiros. They didn't give meiser from. But Asrlu, he says, what do you mean? It's Eretz Yisrael. You have to give meiser. He also saw a goyim bow down to water that was flowing from a well. V'shasi Yisrael, and they were drinking from it. V'asrlu, and he asked the Yidden to drink from that water that the goyim served. Aslaka made Rabbi Yochanan. He told Rabbi Yochanan what happened. Amar lei, Rabbi Yochanan said, Ad miktoyrech aloch ziladar. Don't take off your coat even. Go straight back and be matter them and retract from your psukim. Why? Because betzer lav hainu batzra, right? The Torah calls one of the Aramiklat actually, which is in Eretz Yisrael, is called betzer, right? And betzer is taka mechuyev in Meiser, right? Because it's Eretz Yisrael, but batzra is outside of Eretz Yisrael. Sounds like betzer, but it's batzra. So Tosfos brings over here Gemara Makos, where Shlakish says that one of the mistakes Sar Shel Roim is going to make is going to run to Batzra. For some reason, he's going to think that if he's in an Ir Miklat, he's going to be saved, he'll be protected. So he runs to Batzra, and he thinks it's Betzer. And Rish Lakish says it's a mistake because Rabbi Yochanan taught him right here in this story that Betzer Lavanu Batzra, right? That's why we sing in Bevoyo Imayedoim Chanutz Begodim Zevach Loi Bevatzra Tevach Loi Bevoigdim. Right, he's running to Batzra, thinking that it's going to protect him. Okay, either way, Rabbi Yochanan said no problem. They can eat the peiros without meisering because it's not Eretz Yisrael. Ma'im shel rabim, also the water they can drink from, because ma'im shel rabim ain't a sarin, right? Just bowing down to whatever is shaykh to a rabim doesn't work, and Mamela doesn't become aser. Rabbi Yochanan is, according to his reasoning, Rabbi Yochanan ma'im shel rabim ain't a sarin. Ma'im shel rabim is not aser. Mar says the yachid. And the Sarah, and you're going to tell me Yachid is Aser, v'teipiklei tu mechubarin enu. Right? Sounds like Yachid is Aser. Yachid is also not Aser because it's mechubar. And we learned earlier, right, in the Mishnah Memhei, right, two reasons why mechubar doesn't become Avodah Zarah. Either because we learn it from a pasuk, right? Eloheyem al harim not harim atzmam. Harim atzmam cannot become Avodah Zarah. Or because ein bem tfisas yidei adam, there's no tfisas yidei adam. So either way, mechubarin is not a problem. So who cares if it's Rab Mashal Yachid? Where's the letzricha the Tashinu Gala that it wasn't mechubar anymore? I guess the mayim was detached through a wave, and it was disconnected from the ground. It was a whole sugya earlier, which is I think Rabbi Yochanan Mishlakish, whether you have stones that roll down from a mountain and now it's separate, it's detached, whether it's susceptible to become Avodah Zarah or not, right? Whether if the reason is because it's tfisis adam, then you could say there's no tfisis adam if it rolled down on its own. But if you say it's because Elohim Alaharim, then it's not part of the har anymore. Gemara says this time Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asura is right over here. Rabbi Yochanan says Aser. Why? Because he says only because the svara of Maim Shal Rabim ain't Asarin. Because that's a separate svara. But if it's Shal Yachid, it does become Aser. How? It's like Avnei Harshen Daldalu, and maybe it should be mutter else that. Vice does Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says Aser. So Gemara says no. Lo tzricha the tafchinu b'yadein. It could be that even if Rabbi Yochanan hold that Avnei Harshen Daldalu is mutter, over here would be Aser. You know why? Because it could be the guy, the way it uprooted, the way he detached the water from the ground is he hit the water, right? And the water was nitlash, and now it has tfisis adam. So l'kula alma, if he bows down to that biyachid, if the water is miyachid, then it becomes avodah zarah. Says the Gemara, Pchi b'Rabbi ikla gavla. Gavla is a place. Actually, let's stop over here. We'll continue Mirz Hashem, the next daf, next time.